Hi there, geometry students. This is Mrs. Hefty here. We are continuing chapter 4, which deals with congruent triangles. In our last lesson, we talked specifically about congruent triangles. And when we have to prove two triangles are congruent, what did we learn in that last section? We learned that we have to have our corresponding angles, the three sets of corresponding angles, be congruent, and the three sets of corresponding sides be congruent. So if I drew a picture, I would have to have an angle be congruent, the second angle be congruent, and then the third angle theorem says that if you have two angles congruent, then the third angle is congruent. Then the sides also needed to be congruent. Today what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on that there are some shortcuts, some postulates that are going to allow us to have less than 6 things be congruent. I have two triangles that are drawn here. You don't have those on your notes packet, but remember, I can take and I can rotate my triangle. I did this in a previous lesson. And then I could place it on top. And I could show that those are congruent. I think I talked about that in our last lesson. There are some shortcuts that allow us to show triangles are congruent without needing all 3 angles and all 3 sides. So let's talk about those. Those are called the triangle congruency postulates. The first one is SSS. The S's stand for side, side, side. So if I had 2 triangles drawn and all I had marked were 3 sets of congruent sides, then I can say those 2 triangles are congruent by SSS. The second one we have is called SAS, side, angle, side. So I'm going to draw 2 triangles again. Notice here that the angle is between the 2 sides. The angle needs to be between the 2 sides that are marked congruent. So I've got my 2 sides that are marked congruent. The angle needs to be between them. This is wrong. This is not side, angle, side. Do you see that? That angle is not between the 2 sides. I really need to have this angle be marked. So that is not being proven by side, angle, side. The next postulate we have is called angle, angle, side. So I need to have 2 angles and the side not between or not included. Smartboard is slow. So let me draw a picture of that. So I need an angle, I need another angle, and I need the side that is not between the 2 angles, not included. So I should not be marking this one and this one because that's between or included. So I either need to have the bottom one marked or I need to have the one over on the right-hand side marked. I'll mark the bottom one. So that's called angle, angle, side. The last postulate we have is called angle, side, angle. That's where you have 2 angles and then the side has to be between the two angles or be included. So let's draw a picture of what that's going to look like. So I need an angle. I need another angle. And then I need the side that is included or between. So I need to go this side and this side because that's between the two angles. We have a couple of postulates that students like to write down that are not, a couple of ones that are not postulates that are not to be written down to prove triangles are congruent. Angle, angle, angle is not a postulate. If you know your angles are congruent, you don't necessarily have congruent triangles. I did something in Sketchpad. Let me bring it up for you. See here in Sketchpad, I've drawn this triangle right here. Does it look the same size as this one right here? The angles are the same. I have a 41 and 7/10, 115 and 8/10, and 22 and 6/10. And isn't the one on the left smaller than the one on the right? So angle, angle, angle is not enough information to prove that your triangles are congruent. So AAA is not a shortcut. It is not a postulate. You should not be writing that down when you're thinking about proving triangles congruent. The other one that you have on your paper was SSA. Let's take a look at that in Sketchpad. I think I have that somewhere. All right, so do you see here, people, that this red one has the same length as that red one, and this blue one here has the same length as this blue one here, and then I made the angles be equal as well. Do those two triangles look equal? This line here does not look the same size as that line there. AAS is not a shortcut. It's not a postulate. All right, let's take a look at our examples. The directions say determine if the triangles, should be if, the triangles are congruent. Justify with your postulates, and I have them written there. You need to know those, so burn those in your brain. And you can also write not possible if you can't tell if those triangles are congruent. So in number 1, I do see that I have my sides being marked. And then I have the angle in between. So that is side, angle, side, because I have two sides and I have the included angle. In number 2, I have an angle, and I have an angle, and I have the side in between, or the included side. So it's angle, side, angle. In number 3, I see I have a side, and I see I have an angle. I have only 2 parts marked congruent. Now sometimes you're going to have 2 parts marked congruent, and you can mark a 3rd part congruent, like vertical angles. In this situation, I don't have vertical angles. I don't have any shared sides. I don't have anything else marked, and I'm not going to be able to mark any additional markings. So this one, you're going to write not possible. Let's take a look at number 4. In this example, I have a side and a side marker. I only have 2 things marked congruent. I need to be thinking about, is there an additional part? I don't have vertical angles in this top triangle. Now that red line right there, is shared with this line in the bottom triangle. Do you see that this green line and this red line are shared? They're the same length. So even though they're not marked, they are going to be congruent. So I'm going to add that congruent marking. So now I have all three sides being marked congruent. It's SSS. Let's take a look at number 5. I see I have the angle marked up at top. I see I have a right angle on this side, so I'm going to have a right angle on that side. I do have a shared side again. That's going to be the same thing on the left triangle as it is on the right triangle. So I'm going to mark that. I have an angle, and I have the side in between. Angle, side, angle. That's the included angle. Let's take a look at number 6. I see that I have a side marked congruent. I know now when I have a shared side, I can mark it congruent. Remember the arrows on the top and the bottom mean the lines are parallel? These lines are parallel. Okay, let's go ahead and find our transversal. Transversal is the line intersecting the two parallel lines. I'm going to use my red to highlight the parallel lines and the transversal. Do you see the angles being created by the red? So I'm going to mark these. Now I have this side, and I have this side, and I have the angle, right? But the only one with two sides and an angle is when the angle is in between the sides. This angle here is not between the two sides that I have marked. So this is not possible. It needs to be between the two sides I have marked. Here's this side marked, here's this side marked. That angle is not in between. That is not correct. Number 7. I see my angles, and then I'm thinking vertical angles here. Now at this point, my students will sometimes write AAA down. Remember, AAA is not a postulate for proving triangles congruent. This one is not possible again. Let's look at number 8. I see my vertical angles right away. I'm going to mark those. Okay, now I'm looking at my parallel lines. I'm looking for my transversal. I'm going to pick, starting at the top, going down. Do you see the angles that are created there? This one and this one. Now I have two angles. I have this angle and I have this angle, and I have the side in between. So that's angle, side, angle, because I have the side in between. Some people might be saying, I see this line right here. I see that transversal and I wanted to mark this. Would that have been okay? Yes, that would have been okay. Then I would have this angle and this angle and that side. So it would be angle, angle, side, because the side isn't between those two angles. So there you have it. The postulates for proving triangles congruent. You don't need 3 sides, corresponding sides, and 3 sets of angles being congruent. You just need 3 parts, and using those postulates you can prove your triangles congruent. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.